President, if the distinguished lady from Taguig will
Of course, Mr. President,
agree to
we
be
are always
interpolated.
happy to hear the concerns, comments, and questions of the gentleman from Cavite.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is no secret that I have consistently fought to delete duplicative programs in every appropriations measure. And I'm grateful, no, one of these yung Tulong Dunong program. And I'm grateful na in 2019, my call was finally heeded to transfer whatever amount there is under the Tulong Dunong program to the universal healthcare, to the universal access to quality tertiary education. No. This was passed in 2017, 10931, passed in 2017, implemented in 2018, no? And 2019, yun nga, na-integrate na doon sa budget ng 10931. Now, in 2019, how many students applied for subsidy under the test, yung tertiary education subsidy?
1.5 million applied for test tertiary education subsidy
And how many were
in
granted?
2019. A little less than 400,000.
Out of the 1.5 million.
Yes, Mr. President.
What's the common reason for the denial? Funding gap, qualification, ano yung
Yes. Mr. President, most of the applicants complied with the requirements, but the budget can only accommodate around that number.
So funding gap.
Funding,
Ang
Mr.
funding gap
President.
ang problema. So how much would you need to grant, to maximize the grant of universal access, quality access to tertiary education?
Well, as they're computing, Mr. President, let me just spread into the record, with the budgetary, the current budget that we're looking at, which is based on proposals of Senator Ralph Recto and supported by this representation, we're looking at 43.8 billion for the Senate version, 43.8 billion. But according to the CHED chair, this will only cover that 400,000, that same number that they accommodated last year.
Yeah, 43,879,786,000.
Yes, that is correct.
Under the Senate version, or an increase of about 8.5 billion pesos.
That is correct.
That's correct. And of the 8.5 billion, there's 3 billion plus. Let me see. 3,285,957 for the test, di ba? Under the test, yung item. There's 3.285 billion. Ito yung para sa tertiary education subsidy.
Actually,
Is that
Mr.
correct?
President, it's a lump sum. The 8.5 billion is now a lump sum, and it's the UNIFAS board that would now allocate this to the different geographically. And
Okay,
what?
assuming that it's a lump sum amount, 8.516 billion. So, how would we know kung magkano rito yung sa TES and magkano yung to whatever?
Well, I can also tell you now that dun po sa TES, because I asked for that breakdown as well, and it depends if the student will go to a public and private school. Kung public school, 40,000 po yung binibigay nila because libre na yung tuition, so wala nang tuition yon. Pagka private school ang papasukan, then it's 60,000, and this is per SEM, correct? Per year.
We got this figure from the LBMRO actually, 3.285 billion para sa tertiary education subsidy. Ang hinahanap po namin dito, yung 5.23 billion. Because if this lump sum, I would suspect baka sa Tulong Dunong na naman ito pupunta.
Let me check, Mr. President, because I also asked that question, and I was told it's a lump sum. Let me check.
I'm expressing that concern because, it's very explicit under the proposed 2020 CHED budget. Very explicit yung special provision number 3.
Yes.
The implementation of tertiary education subsidy or TES shall cover the existing or ongoing grantees under the Tulong Dunong program. So wala na dapat yon.
Yes.
Everything should go.
Yes. And that is actually what I was going to explain, that in the 2019, there was already this provision that said
But
that,
it was not followed. As I will show you on the board, on the screen.
Okay.
Ito,
Please
2019 po ito. Kindly flash. 2019. Okay, ano nga? Ito, nakuha po namin ito sa mga Facebook posts ng mga congressmen. Okay? Several
Pasensya na,
legislators
sir,
are
hindi po
still
ako- hindi ko-
broadcasting. Ayan, may tulong-dunong pa rin, no? November 18, 2019. Today. So kung nando na yung provision in the 2019 budget, bakit may naliligaw pang mga tulong-dunong?
Mr. President, I was also banking on the two things. No, number one, that is how the CHED chair explained it to me. Plus the GAA for 2020 that came out does not
Yes.
have it. So ako
Does
naman
not have
po,
it, but
hindi
there's
ko
an
alam
amount
yun.
that, there's an amount which item cannot be explained because it's lump sum. 8 billion plus. And under the 8 billion plus, okay, assuming na yung 3.2 billion would fund the tertiary education subsidy, then may naliligaw pa tayong 5 billion plus. And I'm afraid that will be a repetition of these programs scholarship programs by legislators. The problem here is, my issue here is, how could CHED monitor or even supervise? Because they wouldn't know who are the scholars, di ba? And you have your own parameters. You have your own qualification standards, etc., etc. So how would you be able to monitor if congressmen, legislators are the ones vetting the applicants for their own scholarship programs?
Actually, Mr. President, according to the chair of CHED, every applicant every potential beneficiary has to apply with CHED.
Yes, but in this case, I would like to find out from CHED, alam ba nila? If these are posted on Facebook accounts of congressmen, would you know who are the beneficiaries? Of course not.
They would only know once they apply with them directly. So for now, they don't know who those
They don't know
beneficiaries.
because
But
they
once
don't know
they
because they don't
apply-
know.
Mr. President, they're standing by the fact that they have to apply with CHED. They have to be official applicants with CHED.
But if there's a budget for an item that CHED doesn't know about, may scholars outside of CHED or outside universal quality, access to quality, ano ba yun? 10931, para nalang madali.
The bottom line for CHED, Mr. President, and my understanding also is that we have at least 400,000 scholars that need to be accommodated based on the existing budget of roughly 8 billion. Ako naman po, I was going by that budget because that was more or less the budget for in the past year. So without even accommodating an increase, I was just following those lines. And with the assurance that they would be complying with CHED requirements and that anyone can apply. Yun ho yung tinanong ko sa kanila.
Okay, so will the sponsor agree with me na ilump na lang natin all together do sa 43.8 billion yung para sa tertiary education?
Opo, yes. Yun naman ho ang
At
aking understanding.
wag na maligaw yung 5.2 billion.
In my notes po, talagang under ano ho yan, universal access to quality tertiary education yung UQATE, which is very hard to pronounce.
Mahirap
Yung
talaga.
ACTE.
Kaya
Let's just
10931 na
call
lang.
it the free public education
Yes.
fund.
So, what is our assurance that the 5.2 billion, 5.230 actually, would be returned to the original 43.879 billion?
Ang sinasabi po ni Chair Popoy is that it should just be under test. That's it. And that qualifies anyone to apply.
Anyway, during the period of amendments, we'd like to propose an amendment to the special provision number 3 para lang malinaw.
Yes, and if His Honor has it, we would
Yes.
appreciate looking at it so that we can,
Ito yung nasa screen,
Ito
yun
na
ang
yun.
proposed amendment. At the proper time, of course. But if that's acceptable, and I would assume that this will be acceptable to CHED for proper monitoring. Di ba?
they're nodding their head, and I also heard the word yes.
I wouldn't anticipate even that they would not nod their head. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Lacson.